So I'll just uh, continue where I left. So I'll start with chapter 5, the individual and society. So in this, what Annemarie Schmeil in this chapter, she has started with this section, the human being. So she says that man's, she is quoting Maulana Rumi in famous Fima Fihi, that man's situation is like this: an angel's wing was brought and tied to donkey's tail, so that donkey perchance might also become an angel, thanks to the radiance of angel's company. Anyway, she is trying to say that man's predicament, that he has been forced into a, for example, the fall of Adam from heaven. So he is a human being, more than a sad, less, more than a, not an angel, not an Satan, somewhat in between. So in order to go to something higher, so it has to stick or attach something to higher values, for salvation, for atonement, or for something, for a flight, or in Urdu what is called parvaz, towards higher and higher levels. Those higher levels may be mystical dimensions of self-realization, or towards salvation. Now this is what she says, it how you have to be, uh, how you can reach those higher stages of self. So it is by, there's a famous, it's an hadith, but Sufis are, maybe interestingly, they are fond of this, that hadith, that man arafa nafsuhu faqad arafa rabbuhu. A person who is closer to his self is closer to God. A saying that could be frequently and was interpreted as possibility of finding the deepest mystery of God in oneself. So it could also be understood in a general sense. A North African Sufi Al-Mursi says, he who knows his lowliness and inability recognizes God's omnipotence and kindness. And Rumi elaborates the same idea in the moving story of Ayaz, the Turkish officer beloved of the mighty Sultan Mahmud of Ghazna, entering every morning secret closet where he had kept those worn out frock and torn shoes. That was all he owned before Mahmud showered his favors upon him. And by recognizing his unworthiness, the poverty, he gratefully understood the master's bounty. So she has quoted from Rumi, but one, maybe she has also not that famous Socratian dictum, know thyself. So you can also include that. Maybe she has some missed it, not missed it. Maybe it's a different tradition. Not tradition, you can say different episteme, which maybe they want to reach the same thing, but maybe the methodologies mean here it's mystico religious or philosophical. That is philosophical but may not be mystical in this religious or poetic sense, or not in the mystic sense. Yes. And the human being could, however, also become asfal softly, in the lowest of low. That's the verse of Quran. لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ فِي أَسْفَلِ السَّافِلِينَ. If a human being doesn't realize his potential of being ashraful makhluqat, he doesn't come up to that standard of by which he was purposefully created. He will go into the lowest of low. He will even fall to the level of being man. He will go to the lowest of low. Means there are some, for example, if the animal traits become overwhelming in one's lower self, means greed, ire, envy, voracity, tendency to bloodshed, many more negative trends make the human being forget his heavenly spirit, his connection with the world of spirit. For this reason, Ikhwan as-Safa, as well as some Sufi writers, have thought that these animal qualities become manifest on doomsday in the shape of dogs, donkeys, and the like. For the Hadith says, everyone will be resurrected according to the state in which he or she dies. So, to explain the mystery of man is impossible. Man, as Rumi says with compassion, that prefigures John Donne's expression, a mighty volume. That external worlds fit with this world, the inner meaning with the spiritual world. So, in the same way, the use of word abd for human beings goes back to numerous verses of Quran. Abduhu, Abdullah. So, in Muhammad is Abduhu. Iqbal summed up these feelings once more. So, he has summed up in Javed Nama how you can really reach to those higher levels of realization of consciousness by being really the Abduhu, Abdullah. In the Quranic verse, خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ وَالْجِنَّ لِيَعْبُدُونَ, who have created not jinns and ins but for the purpose of being abd. Abd can be translated as slave. You have that. The abd also has a sense of, so I'll just continue with it. So now I will come, since this chapter is of individual and society. So now the realization of social lives of Muslim or Islam in a collectivity. So how to the realization, the place of Prophet, even though he is also Ashhadu anna la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu. He's also abduhu wa rasuluhu. But the designation as a Muhammad as a seal of Prophet, so included how Muslim theologians the impossibility of appearance of any other religion and divinely inspired Sharia after Muhammad's death. So there have been movements like Babi movement, Ahmadiyya movement, who want to have, at the turn of 20th century, they were declared heresies, and the merciless persecution of these Baha'is who claim to possess a divine revelation violated by the dogma of Muhammad as a final bearer of divine revelation. But Iqbal has somehow phrased Annemarie SUHAIL the finality of Muhammad in these words. The birth of Islam is the birth of inductive intellect. Inductive intellect means going from examples and then reaching to you try to test example by example till you reach that higher truth, and once you reach that higher truth, that is the truth, so you accept it in its finality. So he has just explained, he has rather this finality of prophethood in these words. The birth of Islam is the birth of inductive intellect. So, okay. So in Islam, prophecy reached its perfection in discovering the need of its own abolition. So once you reach that final perfection of discovery of that ultimate law, you are going to accept it. There is no need to further explore something because you have reached that thing. So, but in Muslim idiom, so popular belief, Prophet was not only sent to humankind but also to angels to honor him. So, but connected with the theme of seal was the question: what would happen if there were human beings on the stars in other? For example, if there is life apart from this planet Earth, and the advances in discovery in astronomy have made these questions not plausible in our times. So they might not have been plausible some years back. So Fazullah Khairabadi, Ismail Shir, could God create another Muhammad in such a case? Ghalib, the poet of Delhi, wrote a line which was quoted with the approval of Iqbal in Javed Nama. Wherever the tumult of word arises, there is also a Rahmatal Lil Alameen. Alam means one, Alameen means plural. So in a beautiful poetic way, he has also tried to the realm of prophethood Prophet Muhammad can be also, it also includes the other life forms, whatever, if they are discovered. So prophetology took different turns among Shias and in particular in Ismaili community. For example, the 6 days of creation were connected with 6 cycles of prophet. Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. And seventh will be resurrection. Each of these seven prophets bring Sharia, the divine law, which is then pursued by Wasi, the heir, and then Moses, Harun, Muhammad, Qais, Ali. So even in Islam, so there have been sects. The main sect of Shia and Sunni, so which she has somehow tried to. One important thing she has said that slandering of prophet is one of the worst crimes, liable according, because in the Muslim tradition there is a tremendous, what I should say, the place of prophet is very much, it cannot be somehow, it's unquestionable, and the regard and love. So what she is trying to say, the Sabah Rasul, slander of prophet, is one of the worst crimes, liable according to some authorities or to capital punishment. One has to keep in mind to understand Muslims' reactions to Salman, these satanic verses. So she is trying to say that maybe the reaction of Muslims post that Rushdie affair was not totally unjustified. So how she has the place of Muhammad in Sunni and Shia theology, how Sunni and Shia worldview, Muhammad and Ahmad, Ahmad and Muhammad. Not first, there is no end to Muhammad's external and spiritual growth. Fridtjof Schoen has represented him in interesting model using his earthly and heavenly names. He's connected to Laylatul Qadr, connected to the night of heavenly journey. Positive activity and receptivity, mysterious tremendum and mysterious fascination. Descent of the divine word and ascent into the divine presence are thus understood from Prophet's two major names. So the Sunni Shia comparison was not there, so I somehow there is a mistake. So I just mistook it for how Fridtjof Schoen had categorized Muhammad and Ahmad. So not only we have Quran, we have Sunnah, and we have various sects. We have also and how we can interpret Quran and Sunnah in the times, in the times after the death of the Prophet. So one of the normative believers has to be, it is so-called mujaddid or renovator. So a renovator or reformer, not reformer, a renovator should be there who will make the spirit of Quran or tradition maybe plausible to the times we are living in. For example, in famous in Islam we have Quran, Sunnah, Ijma, Ijtihad. There are, if you have some problem, you have Quran, Sunnah, Qiyas, Ijma, Ijtihad. These are different ways how you take decisions. But in every century, there is also a scope for a renovator who is supposed to appear at the turn of every century of the Hijrah to interpret afresh the Sunni tradition. So the concept becomes more central, understandably, in course of time. And further, the days of Prophet and the companions were away, although there is a considerable number of people who are considered by this or that trend in Sunni Islam to be mujaddid. One name immediately comes to mind, and that is the renovator of second millennium, Mujaddid al-Fisani, Ahmad Sirhind. Coming from Sharia-minded Naqshbandi Sufi tradition, he tried to, at the beginning of second millennium of Hijrah, at the turn of 16th or 17th century, to reform Indian Islam, which he felt had been polluted by adapting to many Indian pagan customs. For example, the Emperor Akbar's idea of creating a Dini Ilahi, an eclectic religion comprising the positive aspects of all religions. Maybe it encouraged a wrath among Orthodox Muslims. So Ahmad Sirhindi tried to call back Mughal nobility to the true highway that leads to salvation. Maybe Aurangzeb, after the death of Akbar and Shah Jahan, then Aurangzeb maybe had taken his ideas when he had that Futuh Alamgiri and his own puritanical scriptural understanding of Sunni Islam. He is the representation. He represents. He can be traced to Imam Sarhandi, the intellectual lineage. So there are later also some Mujaddidis like Al-Qur'ani, Sayyid Siddiq Hasan Khan, and other people. Now, one thing is that famously in Islamic culture, the ideal of what is the idea of Ummah? What is Ummah? So there have been various debates of Ummahs, Dhimmis, people who believe in. So the idea of Ummah is normally an all-embracing. It's an all-embracing Ummah in which different races, colors were known, and Quran defines the community of believers. But that community of believers had to be realized in a constantly expanding state. The state was not a static mosaic in which an increasing number of new non-Arab converts who had accepted Islam had to ally themselves with one of the Arab tribes as Mawla, client, and only as adapted members of Arab community could they gain full citizen status, not so much by embracing Islam and believing in one God and his prophet. So it's like there are problems how when Islam expanded to new converts, they had converted because of belief or some other reasons. So it created economic or political or other reasons. So it created its own problems for the people. For example, the Mawli soon realized the paradox of the situation and system broke down with the growing numbers, especially for Persians, who often became the true guiding lights of intellectual progress in medieval Islam. So the other problem is that of Dhimmis. Ummah had to deal with Dhimmis, Ahl Kitab, people of the book, Jews, Christians, Sabians, Zoroastrians, who were placed under the protection of Dhimma, of the Muslim government, and had to pay special tax, but who had the right of government, of self-government under the respective religious leaders, whether it was rabbi, bishop, and the like. But she says, she quotes that the government rarely interfered with their affairs and they could occupy almost any profession. A large number of Christian and Jewish physicians, translators, secretaries in the administration, for example, Copts posted centuries of experience to put the Muslim rulers' disposal is well known, feature of medieval and post-medieval life. The fact that many of the Jews who had been expelled from Spain in 1492 chose to settle in Ottoman Empire, where they enjoyed freedom to live and to practice their skills shows the tolerance of Muslim government as compared to the Christian Spain. To this day, Muslim countries have high-ranking officials from Christians or Pakistan. Or in Pakistan, the Parsi community who are fully integrated in high court judges or ambassadors. To mention only some examples from Pakistan, Egypt's Butros Ghali is another example of non-Muslim serving as respect. So she has said in medieval times the Muslim government was generous enough, so not tolerant enough to accommodate. They might have used their talents, but they were also accommodative enough. So there's a good book on history of Muslim Spain, but can be other opinions also, like this famous Moses bin Mahmud who wrote this guide for perplexed. So there are some books which might give some other opinion why they went to Spain, Morocco, and so the level of tolerance or level of accommodation that might not have been that much as maybe she is saying. But by and large, there's consensus that, not consensus, by and large, people believe that. This famous book by this Bernard Lewis, Jews of, and the name of the book is Jews of Arabia, Jews of Islam, Jews of Islam. Yes. Now I am coming back to this categorization. It was intra what I classification, how in Muslim governments, Ummah, how Muslims versus non-Muslims, how Dhimmis, Ahli Kitabs, and within Islam also we come to that the debate of Shiaism and Sunnism. That table was there, the Kharijite, the debate. So what is Sunni and Shia? So Sunni is adhering to Prophet's words and example. Authority is contractual. Shia authority is inherent in the leader by virtue of inherent sacred knowledge. The leader of in Sunnite, the leader of community is at the theory elected from Muhammad's clan Quraysh. The capital caliph has no teaching and interpreting authority. The caliph is the leader of the community in prayer and war. The imam is rule is golden and necessary. The imam. So there is basically the division is that of imamate and caliphate. Imamate is something having a lineage, it's blood driven, and it goes to the all of Prophet Muhammad. But the caliphate is it's an agreed upon consensus of the given times, rightly guided caliphs in the earlier times, and it could vary from time to time. So it's a debate of how the ruler should be in Muslim theology and how he has to be elected. The idea of theodemocracy, which in modern days it's being tested in certain way. So from Taimiyya to Shia theology, people have different interpretations how the ruler should be ruled. The idea, for example, people in Sunni theology quote famously that 60 years, if there is a tyrant who rules for 60 years, it's better than one day of lawlessness. But you can quote other verses where people say that God may accept a person who is not a believer. A tyrant ruler cannot survive, but a ruler who is not primarily a religious or having a belief system which concurs to Islam, he can survive, but a tyrant cannot survive more time. So these are two worldviews, how government is to be chosen and other things. So within the womb of this Shia Islam, Orthodox Sunni Islam is by and large the largest group. So in the book Annemarie SUHAIL has talked about the Shias. So a particular school of Shia thought is Zaydis, and how the Zaydis had evolved. And after that Zaydis, there is a certain movement in Islam. There are Mahdi, the idea of Tiwalar Shia movement, the idea of Ismaili movement, even whose later sub branches they have also come in Bombay, in Gujarat, as Bohra traders, and a small group of Sulaimanis who remain faithful to Yemeni connections. So there have been illuminous people like Badruddin Tayyib, the first Muslim president of Indian Congress, A.A. Faizi, with her interesting modern interpretation of Islam, Atiya Begum, the fighter of women's education in the first decades of 20th century, were part of Sulaiman Bohra. And even you can also have people like Muslim thinkers, like for example, there have been people like Khojas and people like Aga Khans and other. So these are different sects, subsects within the domain of Islam. But one thing is that at the end of the chapter, she wants to discuss for most reformers. There have been the initiation of any sect, every sect was necessitated by a certain need, sociological need, or whatever you can justify that. For example, the idea of this imamate. So people wanted to realize the hidden imam who will guide people. So they wanted to have an actual living embodiment of that imam who was not hidden. So there was a sect was born. So at the end of the chapter, she would say that innumerable questions have arisen which were never discussed in previous century, but which may have led to fresh understanding of Muslims. For most reformers have reminded their core religions of Surah. Verily, God does not change the fate of people until they change themselves. So, but she quotes at the end of the chapter that of Cotton Smith, Orientalist, William was right when she remarked that in such meetings and conferences, now she is enlarging the debate between Islam and Christianity. Much talk about Islam can be heard, but very little about God. So basically, she is trying to have a broader understanding of not only within traditions, within inter-Islam or intra-Islam, within monasteristic schools and within Islam, also different sects of Islam, a broad understanding towards realization of that ultimate through whatever that mysticism, realization, God, some transcendent realization of that ultimate reality. So in this chapter, God and his creation, eschatology. So it's a chapter. So the start of it, she says, to reflect on the essence of the Creator is forbidden to human intellect because of the severance of all relations between two existences. Thus wrote Muhammad of the Egyptian modern theologian. Islam has generally held the opinion that it's sinful to apply human reason to God. Thus, Hadith says, think about the creation but do not think about the Creator. One has to accept the way in which he described himself in the Quran. For according to Ismail Raji al-Faruqi, the Quran expresses God's inconceptualizability in the most emphatic manner. And so how we can realize God? That's also a very important question. So there's a famous debate even within Muslims of God. How can realize God? Of debate of one and one in many, wahdatul wujud and wahdatul shuhud. One may lead to metaphysical pantheism, other leads to monism. So these are different manifestations of this debate, and also the sifat debate, the sifat which earlier I also discussed, the sifat of Allah, how you can realize him. You cannot realize him in some God, existence of God. It has to be felt, but it has not to be, what I should say, grabbed in some concrete form in terms of our senses. The idea of seeing is believing does not hold true in this sense, because you cannot see God in the sense, physical sense. Seeing, even though God sees, but you cannot see him. So what does seeing mean? So seeing, you have to transcend the elements of seeing something, to see. But simultaneously, the paradox is there, so which has been discussed. For example, belief in predestination is the deepest and most logical expression of interpreting the world and human life in purely religious way. The statement translates well as the Muslims' understanding of God's omnipotence about lordly prayer. So history of religion, now she comes to history of religion, knows different ways of what I was trying to say, ways to describe God, or at least to try to understand him. There are the via causalities, the via eminentia, and via negations. For example, all three can be comfortably applied to three ways of knowing God, these three. So all three can be comfortably applied to Islam, although the first one seems to be predominant in Quranic message, means via causalities. Among his names are Khalik. Causality means cause and effect. Cause. His name is Khalik, the creator, if you want to translate it in English language. Al-Bari, Al-Musawwir, the creator, the shaper, the form giver, and besides others that point to his care for creatures, such as Ar-Razik, the nourisher. He is Al-Muhil Mumit, Al-Muhiyy Mamut, the one who gives life and who gives death. Every day he is in some work. He never rests, and slumber or sleep do not touch him. just he has placed his signs in the horizon and themselves. He also taught Adam the names, and furthermore he taught Quran. That means he taught everything. For the Quran contains the expression of his will, while the names endow humankind with the power over everything created, as well as with an understanding of the divine names, through which his creative power manifests itself. So that's it. So now she says, as much as the tradition of the Quran uses the via causalities to point to God's power, they also use via eminency. That is, they show that He is greater than everything conceivable. This is summed up in the form of Allahu Akbar. He is greater than anything else. Also, that's great. This is great. And He's above what they associate with Him in some any form, material form, physical form. Even in terms of thoughts, you cannot imagine something greater than him. Anything which is greater or greatest, he is greater than what our mental imagination can go. So God's will is higher than human will, but this description does not mean, as Fazlur Rahman says, that we have to do with watching, frowning, and punishing God, nor as a chief judge, but a unitarian purposive will, creative order in the universe. So this is how he wants us to imagine God. So the via enmity can be summed up in the state: God's perfection is infinite. There are no perfections. So the third one, the first one was causalities. The third, emanate, and the negation. Now I'm going to emanate. The God can be seen through it. The can be summed up in the statement: God's perfections are infinite. There are no perfections compared to which there is not a single, still greater perfection in God and with God. And rightly did an oft-quoted Arabic work say, praised be He by whose work the intellect becomes confused. Praised be He by whose power the heroes are incapacitated. The explanation of utter confusions leads to the third way of describing God, the via negations. Whatever you think is perishable, that which enters not in any thought, that is God. So it's a beautiful way of saying. So this is via negations. You negate something by negating the way you have logic by Aristotle, logic by exclusion, logic by doing something by examples. So in Greek logic also, method of excluded middle. So or you have in linear equation, you solve something by eliminating. So what you eliminated, whatever is there, and ultimately what you arrive as is something you call its truth. So you eliminate things, and ultimately you arrive at what is left. So here he says, whatever you can think is perishable, and that which enters not into any thought, that is God. So that's good. As so says Rumi in his work. So Ibn Arabi tries to describe him in terms of that point simultaneously to his transcendence, his eminence. There's nothing. So there's transcendence and immanence is a very good thing. Good. These are two important concepts, maybe. What is transcendence and what is eminence? Transcendence means always there is that scope of moving out of the concept is trying to. You cannot localize a concept or something concrete in some localized way. Transcendence means at every point it's trying to have a flight. It's going to out. You cannot catch it. When you have an eminence, you want to have some concrete qualities and adjectives realized in some form. So they are two polar opposites. So his essence is like his eminence, that is nothing but a faint attempt to describe him. Deus Abux, who him, Ibn Arabi tries to describe him in terms that point simultaneously to his transcendence and his eminence. This is nothing but a faint attempt to describe him. The Deus Abscontis, whom one can approach at best by seizing him of his grief, that is to describe one of his manifestations, which cover his essence like garments, like veils. So how is one to speak about one who is absolute transcendent and yet is closer to mankind than their jugular vein? This is Quranic verse. so that mystics have found him at the end of the road, in the ocean of the soul, and not in the mosque, not in the Makkah, not in the Jerusalem. Poems have sung in colorful images, paradoxes, negations, affirmations, which, however, do nothing but hide transcendent essence, for he is, so to speak, the super unknowable. So, if I remember in my library of memory, where words do end up to describe his existence, new words do sum up to summarize his presence. So this is, he is there and he is no. You cannot know. So that there's transcendence evidence. So it comes to mind, but you cannot really catch it. Now he says on the philosophical side, the Ismailis have tried to maintain his stance by using double negation, freeing God from all material, from all association with the material, from the association in non-material. God is thus neither within the sensible world nor within the extra-sensible. This is an Ismaili way of seeing God's existence. Now there is this is Quranic literature. In Sufi, in Hadith Qudsi, there is a particular Hadith Qudsi. Mystics have a different interpretation. In Hadith Qudsi, God says that he was a hidden treasure who wanted to be known and became the focal point among mystically minded Muslims. But while God is usually seen and experienced as the one who does not need anything, Al-Ghani, so this is Sifat, the self-sufficient, the rich, the moving of the divine names who long to manifest themselves and to be reflected in the world, leads to the fact that God, at least on the level of this rebellious, needs the creatures, and that in the last instance God and man are as it were interdependent. An idea found in mystical speculation where everywhere in the world, but understandably contrary to the convictions of traditional Muslims who maintains God's rulership and self-sufficiency. So if God is a treasure who wanted to be discovered, so man becomes, the existence of human being becomes important in the existence of existence of God. So it leads to a different debate. But somehow it also contradicts some of the sifats of the God. He's Ghani. He doesn't need anything. So how mystics interpret it and how traditional school of Orthodox traditional school have an interpretation. So you can see they are at crossroads. So, for example, when looking at active, powerful Lord of Quran, one wonders how scholastic theologians could define him in rational terms. Aqidiyya Sanusiya, a dogmatic creed from the 15th century, which was largely used among Muslims, described God with 41 qualities, sifat, means adjectives or qualities. 6 are the basic qualities, which the first and the essential one is existence, further the pre-eternity, azaliya, and eternity abdiya, pre-eternity and post-eternity, which he has been there always and he will be there always. His being different from what he has become in time, his subsistence, and the fact he needs neither place nor originator. He has further 7 qualities, which are power, will, knowledge, life, hearing, seeing, speech, and 7 accidental qualities, that is, his being powerful, being willing, being knowing, being living, being hearing, seeing, being speaking. The differentiation emerged from the early theological distinction between Mu'tazilites and traditionists about his attributes. So now I'm coming back to our discussion of tension between divine transcendence and eminence, between theologically defined impersonality and experience personality. So what I was saying. So when something transcends, he is out. When it's eminence, you can catch it, you can experience it. So how can this paradox be resolved? Is reflected in the variety of sayings, verses and extra Quranic divine words, the Hudus Qudsiya. For example, there's another, the way I have quoted, the God is a treasure which wants to be discovered. In the same way, there is another hadith could say which says, "My heaven and my earth do not comprise me, but the heart of my faithful servant comprises me." So even other mystic traditions also people say that the heart of pure seeker or believer is the Kaaba. Or even there are various mystic, poetic, mystic tradition verses which I cannot quote this time. So my heaven and my earth do not comprise me, but by heart my faithful servant comprises me. Points to this problem. He is uncomparable beyond every possibility of being grasped by human thought and human being. His slave cannot talk about him but ta- by Takul, keeping him free from all human comparisons and not admitting the slightest possibility of analogia entis. But when one thinks that he's made Adam his Khalifa, his vicegerent on earth, and made him alive with his breath, one uses tasbih. Tasbih means analogy, a sort of analogy. Comparison with concepts. Both aspects reflect divine, for man is both slave and representative. And God's attributes of majesty, Jalal, and beauty, Jamal, which are related to each other like man and woman, as it were, from the fabric of created universe. So, but there's another verse in Quran which says that when we are going to explain, in whatever one wants to explain creation, one knows from the Quranic verse, he only needs to say kun fayakun. He says be and it is, for he creates by his power as normative theology states. So like in our modern day concepts of cosmology, Big Bang suddenly happened. The act of creation. Act of creation can it, it happens. The idea of temporality of time, somehow it freezes, so it happens. And the existence of God can be in some sense imagined, that he has capacity, is that he says be and it world, he said the world be and the world came into existence. And Ibn Arabi has taken this thing at another level. For example, he says that God takes created universe back into himself to exhale it again in infinitesimally short moments. The world is as it were created anew, and nothing exists that is not subject to constant, though invisible change. Poets and thinkers sing endless hymns of praise to the Creator, whose work amazes everyone whose eyes see, and they ask in grand poems, who made this? So the creation of the universe, it coming in restriction. So it's also discussing modern cosmology, but they will not use the idea of God. They might use the words like steady universe. The universe is inflating between. It was existing and it will exist up to eternity, or it has cycles of existence, and the cycle has a particular period, but the existence of God is somehow shifted in the background. But here in Islamic cosmology or theology or teleology, the existence of God is related with the existence of universe, and the existence of universe is being created at every now and then, and potentiality of the sifat of Allah, existence of God. He says be it and it, and the polarity, for example, he says the polarity is the necessity for the existence of universe, which like a woven fabric is capable of existence only thanks to the interplay of God's Jalal and Jamal, the mysterious tremendum which I talked earlier, and mysterious fascinum. God has majesty as well as beauty. By inhaling and exhaling, like systole and diastole in heart, it breathes and it goes up. Azal, eternity without beginning, and Abad. Eternity, Azal means eternity without beginning, and Abad means eternity without end, are the poles between which the world pulsates. Heaven and earth, Gaib, unseen, and Shahada, the visible things, these are Quranic verses, point to the dual aspect of a created universe, as do the concept of Lah, Lahu Mahfuz, the well preserved tablet, and Kalam, the primordial pen, which works together. to write the creature's destiny. The first verse of Quran, Ikra bismi rabbika allazi khalaq. Allama al-insan lam kalam. The kalam, which is on that Lohi Mahfuz, the tablet, which has written, things have been written there, and things are evolving. The existence of world is an evolution, in it's an evolution of something which was written eons back. But within the divine, within the which is universe is unfolding itself in a way in consonance with the divine, what I should say, tablet. It's not following the code exactly, but it is what has been written. Things are evolving accordingly. Because here I would make a slight difference, because in Islamic there are hadiths and theology that by virtue of dua you can sometimes also change your qismat or taqdeer. So whatever it's written in Lohi Mahfuz, because the existence of creator is not somebody who is sleeping, so you can make it, so you can even change that what's written if God wishes, if you are closer to God. So she says here, the sudden outbreak of the divine breath may be called mystical parallel to the modern Big Bang theory. Now she's making connections to modern science. In either case, one cannot go behind the moment, and the divine that caused it remains absolutely transcendent, while we see as through a looking glass. So now she comes to the existence of paradise, hell, heaven, so Jannam, the description of it. So she also describes the Mu'tazilite view, categorization denied the possibility, but the traditional move was that it's possible at least in intervals. And can you see God, existence of God in the heaven? Can you see Him there? And the Hadith says that your Lord is smiling, and was applied to the inexhaustible happiness caused by inexplicable experience called smile of divine Lord. Quran offers another picture of paradise, namely it's filled with laud and praise of God, while blessed exchange of the greetings of peace. Based on the Quranic Surah, Umar Swaradi spoke the country which consists of fields whose plants are praising Lord of God. So that all too human description of paradise, there are endless variations in the works of fanciful preachers and poets, was criticized by both philosophers and mystics. Maybe philosophers and mystics had a different view of paradise. For example, Iqbal quotes somewhere in Reconstruction that heaven and hell are mental states. They may not be perfect locations. Or Ibn Sina taught something of Samuel Akram, which was supplied by Averroes, that only soul survives. Only souls of highly developed thinkers and knowledgeable people will not live on, like simple souls, grass, are destroyed. So she has also said these ideas in a different case are resurfacing in Iqbal's philosophy. But Sufis like Rabia Basri have criticized, they have critiqued it. For example, Rabia was probably first to voice his criticism when wanted to put fire to the paradise and pour water on the hell so that the two wheels might disappear. Why turn to such wheels? After all, human beings are created for God, alluding to the story of Adam left paradise because he ate for the forbidden fruit. Or in tradition, the green, one writer asks, why would we want to settle in a place which our father Adam sold for the green? So, but this is not a traditional view of heaven and hell, but Annemarie she has a certain penchant, she has a certain inclination in having this interpretation of heaven and hell. Means the love of God is beyond. It's too. It's so great an idea. It's that any love of heaven, which is a there is a any earthly pleasure whose highest manifestation is heaven, or any earthly pain whose highest manifestation is heaven. The love of God is far, far higher than that. So she somehow feels like, which has even been paraphrased by Rabia Barsi. Even Iqbal, hell is a realization of one's failures in one's achievement, while heaven is a growing, diminishing after individual who has strengthened himself sufficiently, has overcome the shock of corporal death. So then the new phase begins, entering into ever deeper layers of infinite, for heaven is no holiday. Once the journey of God is finished, the infinite journey in God begins. So I'll stop here. So I'll continue one more.